Welcome to CrossTalk, 6th Plymouth District, a new episode. My name is Kevin Tocci, and I will be your host for this segment. What is this segment about? Well, it isn't like the usual crosstalks. What we do is we have an opportunity. We're privileged to have our local legislators who pop in, and we sit down and we talk about some of the things that are ongoing in the district, up at the State House, out and around the district. And of course, your representative for the 6th Plymouth District is none other than Mr. Ken Sweezey. Welcome back, Representative.
Thank you. Always great to be here.
You got it. We already have a list of topics all outlined. We'll start out with, here we are in November. What has the past several months been like for you, where it's almost the near end of the first half of your first legislative session?
Yeah, I can't believe that we're already bearing down on another election year, which is crazy, and that 1 year's down. We just recessed for the holidays, actually, so we are officially basically halfway done with the term, which is crazy to think about. It definitely went by fast. A lot to learn. I say the days are long and the months are short, so that's how it feels all the time up there across the district and in Boston. But it's been fun. It's been great. Like I said, learned a lot, and ready to just keep going into year two.
We'll start out talking a little bit about budgets. I know that recently that there was a supplemental budget for fiscal 25. Yep. What are the key items that were discussed, and you believe that still need to be addressed before the legislature, and I don't know if this happened or not, the legislature wraps for the holidays? Yeah,
so throughout the year, this is a common thing where, we prep our budget back in the spring, summertime. It's sort of due right before we break for summer, back in July. So we got through that process, and this is, for the previous fiscal year, even before I was elected. We just did our 26 this July. But it's normal that we need to close out accounts and add additional funds for programs that might be running over and things like that. So we had about 3 or 4 different supplementals throughout this year, this first year of the term, and we just did our closeout. So the final supplemental budget for the previous fiscal year, FY2025. So this was another almost $2.5 billion. I think it was 2.3. So quite a sizable amount, and a lot of it, 1.6 of it was for Mass Health. I mean, Mass Health is running at these wild overages in what we're expecting, and that's something we need to get under control. I actually voted against the supplemental, which is not very common. It's even more rare than voting against the regular budget, because this is usually just closing out many accounts, especially this final one. But I feel that without accountability in the Mass Health system, understanding where these overages are coming from, why we're running so far, above our estimates, who's using the Mass Health system. We have a very, very large state health system relative to other states, especially of our size. And I just think there needs to be some accountability there and some transparency on the cost. So that was a big reason. There were some changes. I had initial concerns because we were earmarking a lot for direct rental assistance through the home base program, which just gives direct aid. We closed out the hotel shelters. Home base sort of backfills that, and we've swelled that program up to about 9,000 families, up from just 1,400 2 years ago. A huge addition, so we're really keeping an eye on that as well. So there's some issues with the sheriff's departments that we had concerns about in the closeout, and that's why I find the Mass Health numbers so hard, because they're talking about $1.6 billion check to Mass Health, while they're concerned about $160 million overage combined by all the sheriffs and the Department of Corrections. So we're actually, the leadership is kicking off an investigation by the Inspector General, the IG's office, into the sheriff overages, and yet we're going over by $1.6 billion on Mass Health. So some things just don't align there. Want to support our sheriffs. They do some really great work, and DOC as well. So just trying to make sure we're keeping our eye on those dollars. If
I can kind of point out in regards to Plymouth County Sheriff Joe McDonald, I thought I've heard him talk many times about the fact how, since he's gone from the county funding his budget to the state, that it's, there's an amount that he submits for his fiscal year budget. and the state doesn't necessarily meet it. So when he has to do kind of a closeout thing, that's what this is. Have you heard anything similar?
Yeah, and so we are very lucky down here in Plymouth County.
Yeah.
Sheriff McDonald is incredible, as everybody knows. I mean, he's been serving the county for, over 20 years now, about that long. So we're very lucky. He actually welcomes it, which is great to have a sheriff's department that's run so well. He's like, whatever they want to do, they want to delay it, they want to come in, great. So, we are constantly communicating with all our law enforcement partners, but, everyone in the sheriff's office to make sure they know what's going on and what they need. They have some problems with the no-cost call program. That's a big piece of it. So inmates currently get unlimited no-cost calling and messaging. They're spending over 1 million minutes a month on the phone. Really a big problem. The sheriffs are concerned because their programming participation, think GED or therapy or anything that might be able to make sure that they don't wind up back in the correctional system. That participation is going down because you can just be on the phone all day long now. And it's so that's really hurting. But as far as what the sheriffs need, the Plymouth County is unique because they actually create the most revenue. We have a lot of unique programming in Plymouth County that other counties and the DOC do not offer.
County Farm.
Yeah, another reason why we're so lucky down here in Plymouth County. So statutorily, they're required to give all of their revenue back to the general fund of the Commonwealth. So they're claiming that, Plymouth County has some deficit, yet I believe the number was close to $30 million that Plymouth County returned to the state. It's just they're doing some really funny legislator math up there some days. So, but the point is, we're here to support the sheriffs. Plymouth County does a great job. I have no doubt that whatever the Inspector General has to do, we'll fly through in Plymouth County and hopefully get our funding as soon as possible.
Something that recently kind of was a topic of conversation in your district, not in one community, but two, battery storage proposals. Pembroke and Duxbury.
Yeah.
What have you heard from residents? Where do things stand with those proposals that have been put forth to those communities?
Yeah, so this is an ever-evolving situation. Yeah. So as you mentioned, the two proposals, one being on West Street in Duxbury. Fortunately, in just the last week or two, we found out that the company is pulling out of that project. So that project, as of right now, will not be going forward, which is great news. That's a huge kudos to the residents, honestly. The planning board, the ZBA, the select board in Duxbury, all were speaking with a unified voice. I was there to support the residents and the town officials as well. I spoke at their select board meeting when they invited the company to sort of, as a forum to explain the project and what they're doing there. And I'm very glad that the residents got together and showed the forces that be that this was not right. It was being put in a residential zone. Look, this is not about being anti-renewables or NIMBYism or anything like that. There's just some common sense. I mean, these are shipping container-sized battery systems. I mean, a shipping container, it equals about 260 Tesla batteries in size and kilowatt hours. I mean, and then they were putting them within 200 feet of private property lines in a residential zone. It's just incomprehensible. There's a fire risk. There's a huge noise problem. I mean, you're putting them near wetlands. It's incomprehensible. So I'm glad that the Duxbury project will not be going forward. We're sort of in the middle of the process in Pembroke. I actually just attended the ZBA meeting on this past Monday. And the planning board in Pembroke did approve it. So that was kind of going through the regular process. It got approved there. It went to the ZBA. As of right now, the Pembroke ZBA has continued the meeting. It was a really great, really well-attended meeting. Again, the residents are really involved. And that's a really important piece if you're getting a theme here between these projects. The residents should be informed. They should know, what's going on in their backyard. Now, this isn't quite a residential zone. It's a little bit different. It's actually going on 139 near behind the Knights of Columbus there on Scoosett Street, if you're familiar with the area. So it's a little bit different that way as far as safety. Now, there are some homes that abut it from Water Street, so there's still some concerns, but it's right along the North River. This is a huge environmental concern. If you get into one of these fire situations, they have this lithium runaway, basically what happens, and you can't put these fires out.
No,
and if you
let it burn out.
Exactly. You basically have to let it burn out. What's it going to take in its path? And if you even try to extinguish it, everything's running off into the North River and then obviously into the ocean. So, massive environmental concerns, safety concerns. So there will be another ZBA meeting, I believe December 15th in Pembroke, and they're trying to get it at the community center because turnout was so high. People were lined up out of Veterans Hall at the Pembroke Town Hall. So it was well attended. I really encourage you. We'll have more information on social. There's a Facebook page as well about from the Pembroke residents. But keep your eye to the ZBA. We're hoping for a good ruling there. Even if the ZBA says no, there is legal standing with what happened in the Duxbury case that the company will likely sue for compliance. So that'll be the step after that. But the biggest piece is just to be involved in the process.
From a legislative standpoint, do you believe the current state regulations on large-scale battery energy storage systems is adequate, or is reform needed? Is there a conversation happening up on Beacon Hill?
Exactly. These problems are being caused by the state. As I say with almost everything, unfortunately, we talk about school funding, we talk about this, we talk about that. The state is just falling short. And the reason why I mentioned the lawsuit in the previous case in Duxbury, the company won because legally the way the statute is written right now and the way it's being interpreted by the courts is that battery storage counts for within renewable generation, which doesn't make sense. Batteries, as everyone knows, doesn't make electricity, it just stores it. So they're using some renewable and these quote-unquote green energy initiatives to sort of backdoor this in. And that's why the courts, the companies are suing, because they've been so successful. And it's unfortunate that it takes the residents to be this upset and this involved to stop something like this. But I was proud to co-sponsor 3 bills by one of my Republican colleagues that would put a moratorium on these battery farms, as well as create a study about them. Because the big thing is these battery life, the batteries don't have long life. They're only about 7 to 10 years. And a lot of these farm leases are like 20, 30 years. So we don't know what we're going to do with the batteries when they're at end of life. Are they storing the waste on site? Because this is dangerous waste that comes out of these batteries as well. Is it on site? Is it getting off? Then you have whole tech situations basically in every town in the district. It's a mess, and people are rightfully keeping an eye on things like that. So the moratorium's important. The study's important. Fire suppression requirements. Setbacks, 2,000-foot minimum setbacks. And the one that I like the most, and it's similar almost to what we were dealing with the MBTA zoning, is the state just doesn't respect the authority of the towns. The way the state is operating right now, you might as well not have town government, because when they want a policy initiative, they just override the select boards, they override the planning boards, the ZBAs, the boards of health, everything. So the third bill would actually say that the state has to respect the decision of the local town board. So if the ZBA says no to the project, it has to be respected. I have no problem with municipalities that have a safe way to site these things and want to bring these projects into their town. That's the great thing about having different towns and different states, and everyone being able to control their own destiny here and have sovereignty over their neighborhoods. But if a town doesn't want it, the state shouldn't be coming down and continuing to just shove these projects down.
Let's kind of transition to another part of your district and a lighter note. I know you recently attended a fundraiser at Camp Kiwanee. This is to support the Hanson Food Pantry. What was your biggest takeaway from the event? Yeah,
we are so lucky. As I get all worked up about batteries and funding and budgets and stuff, I tell people that the doom and gloom is really not the news of the day. It really isn't. You're going to see that. We're going to talk about things where I think some accountability and transparency are good and are needed. But we are so lucky. I feel lucky to represent the 5 towns I do. I've grown up here. I think that it shows why I was, molded this way from the communities. This event by the Hanson Food Pantry over at Camp Kiwanee to support people in need and make sure that the pantry is stocked with all the uncertainty, unfortunately, that we're seeing. We obviously know what happened with SNAP through the first half of November. And, I was out visiting pantries to donate and talk to people that were there, both volunteering and picking things up to see, how they were being affected. And when I went to the Hanson Food Pantry the first week of November, it was full. They had to have extra volunteers sorting food furiously so that they could get it sorted to give out to people. They were stocked. They had some of the biggest donations that they'd had in a long time. And that's the story of our communities. I was so full and heartened to see how much people show out. And the event was incredible. The volunteers, I think they raised over like $10,000, which the money goes a really, really long way for the Hanson Food Pantry and what they're able to do with it. So I really, really encourage you, in whatever municipality you're in, all 5 of my towns, and probably any town that you're in has a food pantry. So I really urge you to participate, volunteer, whether that's a couple pounds of food, a small monetary donation. They're always looking for volunteers to just sort and package some food together to give out to people. But it's a great event because it is a good reminder and it is a lighter note, and it just your neighbors are looking out for you, and no matter what you hear on the news or no matter what you read in the papers, we are very blessed to live in these communities, and I'm reminded of that constantly.
One of the things that we keep hearing more, and it's more notable these days, is food insecurities. Was that discussed at all? Well, mentioned during the fundraiser, especially here in the region, and how do you feel that local pantries play a role in meeting the needs when it comes to food insecurities? Yeah,
one thing I'd say that when we saw from the potential, SNAP benefits being, well, they were delayed, and then, thankfully everything's been restored there. But the governor did one thing that was good that she was doing was funneling money through the food pantries and supporting them directly, because the food pantries know what the needs of the community are. I think there was a lot more that we could have done as a state for those 2 weeks to really backfill some benefits, but all is well that ends well. But the pantries, they know what the community needs are, and food insecurity is a huge problem. I mean, we found out from that shutdown that almost 1 in 7 residents of the Commonwealth are receiving food stamps, and we were fighting really hard for 2 weeks. We wrote letters to the White House, the Senate delegation of Warren and Markey. I wrote letters to the governor. I wrote letters to, and me and other reps, not just myself, to House Ways and Means leadership, all asking them to release SNAP funding to support our residents. But now that that's restored, what I'm really interested in working on is making sure we don't have 1.1 million people that need SNAP benefits. That's, we have a state that is incredibly non-competitive in the business environment. Our private sector job loss is one of the highest in the country. The public sector and government employees are the only ones that are growing. It's a really dire situation, and because of the affluence of some regions in the state, it's kind of can be hidden at times, but we have a lot of people hurting, and that certainly doesn't preclude, our communities as well. Seeing some of the SNAP numbers per town is pretty shocking, and you never know when you're in a pew at church or at your kid's soccer game or at a PTO meeting or anywhere else or even out for dinner, and the people sitting next to you might be food insecure. So it's really good that we have strong, healthy pantries, and there's a lot of other things like Project Bread or the South Shore Community Action Council that does a lot of great work as well around that issue. So.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about the governor's DRIVE initiative. DRIVE, of course, an acronym for, let's see if I get this right, Discovery, Research, Innovation for a Vibrant Economy. The governor has highlighted the DRIVE initiative as a major economic strategy. How do you view the program's potential impact on the state's innovative economy and others?
Yeah, so obviously biotech in Massachusetts is so important, right? I have a science background. I got my degree in forensic science. It's how I got my start in my career. And, this research funding, very important. It's sort of in response to federal cuts that's occurring to a lot of universities, as you've probably seen some battles play out in real time publicly. But, and I sit on the Economic Development Committee that heard this bill and heard testimony directly from the governor and the secretaries. And I had to ask the governor because I'm really concerned about the prioritization that we're doing with our funds. I mean, we talked about it in the closeout. I think we're being a little irresponsible, but for anyone watching this, they probably have been to a town meeting in just the last few years and you've had an override. We've had over 100 overrides in the Commonwealth in just the last 10 years. Those numbers are wildly out of control. I mean, we can't be having these, and now they're talking about eliminating 2.5, which is even worse. But to the DRIVE Act piece particularly, they want to give $200 million to public colleges and universities, and then another $200 million to that will be open to either public or private. So you could potentially have, MIT, BU Northeastern, Harvard getting public funds for research while Hanson and Whitman have overrides for their high school. To me, that's not right. We need to focus on our needs instead of our wants all the time. Like I said, if all our schools are fully funded and things like that, we can go ahead and look at these things because they're important. But a big piece about why these universities do all this research too that didn't really get talked about, and I actually brought it up to the president of Mass Bio, which is the Association for Biotech in the state, and I brought it up to her. I said, the reason that we need all this funding to go to public universities is because the large multinational pharmaceutical companies don't find it financially able, there's no financial benefit for them to research rare diseases. If you can develop this life-saving drug, but it only treats 100,000 people worldwide, well, then Pfizer's not going to develop that because the R&D costs way outweigh what they can make off the drug. So they usually outsource this stuff, and then they end up having to basically buy or lease the intellectual property from the public researchers that we're publicly funding. So what I asked in that regard is just, we need better partnership. You know, a lot of these places are developing in the Cambridge and Boston, Longwood area, and, you know, they're getting tax breaks for these big new lab spaces. And, you know, we need to make sure that they're really good partners. And if they're going to get the intellectual property from our great UMass system, then they need to make sure that they're supporting us financially as well, so that it's not on the backs of taxpayers from towns that have to go through overrides.
Interesting enough, one of the Boston TV stations, one of their investigative teams actually put forth, you know, you have so many communities that are going for overrides and that desperately need that revenue, whether it's for the municipalities or for education. You know, the Fair Share Act, bringing marijuana on board, you know, adult recreational marijuana, that and those revenues, and other initiatives that are supposed to help put money back in.
Right.
And the question that has been posed, I don't know if you've seen that, is like, where is that money going and why is it not helping? Do you get residents who come up and ask you about that?
Oh, all the time. I have people that ask, you know, I mean, and I say it still, you know, initially I was very fearful about the economic impact of the Fair Share Amendment or the millionaire's tax. You know, I thought it was going to chase a lot of people out of the state. And actually right now that hasn't materialized. It's only been 2 years that it's been in action. So, you know, for bigger businesses and people we'll see over the next year or two, but that part hasn't materialized. But it's actually overperforming right now. And yet we still have the exact same problems that we had before. So we're bringing in this extra revenue and it's being spent on things irresponsibly. Half of that Drive Act money is coming directly from Fair Share. $200 million out of Fair Share. You know, this was billed as something that was going to go directly to our communities. It's transportation and it is education. People were sold on this because they thought it was going to go into their local schools and into their local roads, a little bit for the T to get them into work. And that's not what's happened. You know, we also just passed an infrastructure bond bill for the UMass system and other public universities. We can borrow up to over $3 billion for capital improvements.
Sure.
That has to be underwritten with some hard funds, and they want to take $100 million out of Fair Share for the next 10 years to do that. So now you're talking about nearly $1 billion potentially over the next 10 years that could be spent. I mean, the numbers just don't add up to me when you're spending all this money now on capital and higher ed and research in private institutions, and we could still have overrides in our community. So it's something that I look at all the time because people want to use Fair Share as a catch-all. Like, oh, don't worry, our Fair Share revenues are good. Our Fair Share revenues are good. That is a limited, finite amount of money. I mean, we wrote almost $1 billion check to the MBTA last year. Or not last year, during one of the supplements over the summer. But, you know, again, the split was it was only like a $1.5 billion bill, and 75% of it was going to the MBTA. How many riders take the MBTA? Even down here, we have a station, but the ridership has not gotten back to where it was pre-pandemic. The ridership is still smaller. They've added more lines. It still hasn't caught up. They're paying for capital projects, and our schools still have overrides. And it's priorities and it's transparency about where these dollars are going is a huge problem.
Well, let's talk a little bit about healthcare workers. I know that there's a bipartisan bill that you support, the House 4767, and this focus is to protect our healthcare workers. And it's a growing threat in the workplace these days. What drove you and your colleagues to take issue with this now? Yeah,
this has been something that's been brewing for a long time. And, you know, we really saw it during the pandemic, but it's been growing even before that. You know, we saw my background in law enforcement. We see these crime rates going up, you know, after they sort of stabilized and were down for a while, especially after the pandemic. Crime is going up, and that certainly is applying to our hospitals as well. You have nurses, which is still a majority female field, and they're getting assaulted regularly. I mean, we had multiple reps that either were former nurses or in trade unions with nurses talk about these stories that were horrible to hear. I mean, you have these young women just starting out in their career that are getting physically assaulted, broken noses, concussions, concussions. I mean, I have plenty of friends that I went through school with that are nurses that have been assaulted, and it's really, really horrible. And there's a lack of accountability, in my opinion, in two regards. But this bill specifically will make sure that hospital administrators have to create plans, and make sure that their workers are safe, just like any other job would have to do, just like, companies have to be OSHA compliant in the trades and things like that. It's holding hospital systems when we have these exploding costs and oftentimes these exploding profits in these health systems, that they're making sure that their frontline workers are safe. So I'm glad that we'll have some accountability there, but I was a little disheartened that, this problem wouldn't be as big of an issue if we also just enforced the laws that we already have on the books. It is incredibly, incredibly rare that an assault or a violent crime occurs with a perpetrator that has never committed a crime before. It's very rare. The recidivism rate is very high. It's very few people that commit a majority of the crime. So if we actually enforced the laws that we already have, and we actually held people accountable and didn't let them out on no bail or $500 bail like they did with the cop car that burned down in Boston. We need to hold people accountable, and then these things like assaults won't be happening. And that's a piece of it. Understanding there's a big mental health crisis that's ongoing. There's substance abuse crises that also play into this. But I'm glad that at the very least we'll be able to protect our frontline health staff.
We got like 3 minutes left. And I don't know if I ask you this last question as something to prime the pump for our next conversation, probably at the start of the new year. So it'll be a two-part, if you could try to answer it in 3 minutes. As we head into 2026, what priorities are at the top of your legislative agenda? And if there is somebody out there who's watching, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Yeah, great. 3 minutes. Very, very quick for me.
Go.
Yes. So priorities for 26. I mean, there's a lot of financial things we need to really be taking a look at. We're going to have to do the fiscal year 27 budget starting already in April. So it comes up really, really fast. So I think we have an opportunity to really show with how revenues are not performing well. We're way overspending. I think we have an opportunity in 27 to really say, okay, we need to be grounded. We need to take care of needs instead of wants. That's going to be really important. The things like the battery bills, I've submitted late files around Duxbury Beach and access for next summer for our recreational beach users. That's going to be a really huge priority, making sure that those make their way through the committee process in 26 as well. So there's a lot of things, but we'll be across the community, making sure that we hear from everybody here as well. So my priorities are not always what's most important. It's, I want to hear from you, and we do so much constituent services. We hear from people all the time. So please, if you have anything, whether, most of what we do is that, and it's not policy. So please reach out. You can go to kensweezey.com. My email is ken.sweezey@mahouse.gov. Reach out for whatever you need. We're happy to get back to you, and want to make sure that, whether it's SNAP or it's, unemployment benefits or VA or the DMV, whatever it may be, we're here to help you navigate the state agencies. So.
Well, we want to thank you for being a great partner in coming in on a regular basis and talking about what's going on, not only up on Beacon Hill, but things that are going on in and around, and your passion for serving the community. It's evident, and we look forward to more conversations in 26.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. I appreciate you helping us bring it to our constituents.
You got it. Well, that's all the conversation that we have here on CrossTalk, your 6th Plymouth District edition. Until our next conversation, well, first and foremost, happy holidays and have a great day.